The film which you are about to see is an account of the disaster which befell two friends in Indiana. Michael Hall and Roman Lazowski considered themselves the best of friends and have known each other ever since high school. These two loved to go on adventures together, even if they weren't always certified to do so. So on July 1st, 1985, the two friends would plan a spelunking trip to the Spring Mill State Park cave system, which is located in Indiana, about an hour and 40 minutes south of Indianapolis. The park itself is home to a twin cave system, one that has a river that runs through it named Donaldson Cave, and another that's more for experienced cavers known as Bronson Cave. So on this fateful day, our best friends would decide that with the river being low, it would be a good idea to explore Donaldson Cave. So outfitted with only swim trunks, t-shirts, and handheld flashlights, they descended into the cave. At first, their descent was fun and memorable, as they were lucky enough that most of their paths so far had been easy enough to walk through, and the normally raging river inside was barely covering their feet, although still raging in the velocity of which the water was flowing. They then thought to themselves, we must be lucky enough to explore this cave without the hindrance of the river stopping them. Little did they know though, thunderstorms from miles away are what usually feed this mighty river, and prior to them coming out, there was a recent thunderstorm about to replenish it. And so as they walked deeper inside the cave, the small creek started to gradually widen into an angry flowing river. And before they knew it, they were trapped inside the rushing water. So too scared to even move, they tried staying still so they wouldn't just be swept away like driftwood. But just then, Roman would lose his footing and get swept away into the darkness of the cave. Horrified and scared, Michael could do nothing as his friend was tossed away right before his eyes. Though still determined not to join him, he would then prepare himself to hold on for dear life as he would be stuck there for the next few hours, until eventually he would become too exhausted and be swept away into the darkness of the cave as well. As he was being swept away, he would close his eyes and pray for the best, as only a few minutes later his prayers would be answered, and he would pop back out of the cave and be tossed out onto the bank, miraculously only suffering a few cuts and bruises and a broken arm. Lucky for him though, at approximately 1:15 p.m., Park Ranger Bill Carlisle would spot him as he lay crying for help, the whole time barely being able to say that my friend is still in the cave, repeatedly, fearing that the worst must have already happened. Meanwhile, inside the cave, the speed of the waters were reaching upwards of 60 miles, or 96.5 kilometers per hour, and as Roman was being tossed around inside like a rag doll, he feared certain death for sure, when suddenly his arm was able to clip the edge of a rock. That miraculously led to a small dry ledge where he was able to rest, stay dry, and at least wait for help. There was only one problem though. The current from the river ripped Roman's flashlight from his hands and left him soaking wet, which now meant that he was sitting in the dark void, shivering with no food, questionable deadly water to drink, and to top it all off, he was only mere feet away from a murderous current that he couldn't see, but only hear the angry waters of. Meanwhile, back up top, Michael was immediately rushed to the nearest hospital for his injuries, all while Bill Carlisle, the park ranger, would immediately call the local chapter of the National Cave Rescue Commission, which was led by a man named Tom Biquette, who after being told the story was not very hopeful in the rescue of Roman. As soon as Tom and his rescue team arrived at the opening of the cave, they drew straws to see who would be the diver to first penetrate the cave, and see if there was a way to get into the system without losing anyone else due to the mad current. Unfortunately though, due to not only the speed of the current, but the height of the river itself was almost the height of the entrance, making going inside a deadly mission. And so because of this, they had to set up camp near the entrance and wait until morning to try again. The next morning though, the water still hadn't receded back down to the low level, and not knowing whether or not Roman was still alive, Tom decided the team would try again. And so as soon as possible, the team decided to get a blow-up raft and at least try to see if they could push past the entrance. As they struggled through though, they realized they made a huge mistake, as just beyond the entrance, the passageway was becoming more and more narrow, and with the rapid current coming through, they would all helplessly start getting pushed against the cave walls. The outside crew then began to become worried, as the diving crew was supposed to check in and keep in contact every 15 minutes, but as they were battling for their lives, weren't able to. Then after about 3 hours of struggling, the rescuers were finally able to pull themselves back outside the cave to safety. Once outside though, they had to sit back and think to themselves, why are we doing this? For all they knew, he had been fleshed out and wasn't even in the cave anymore. So why were they risking the lives of more people in order to go inside this cave? But just then, they would get their answer, as right outside the cave, Roman's friends and family started to gather in the hopes that they would hear some type of news, whether he was okay or not. Though not wanting to show the family that this was a bad rescue attempt, they kept trying, and eventually the local fire department would show up. And as soon as they got there, they began to dig another entrance into the cave in an attempt to bypass the river. The firefighters were then able to find an old cave shaft that they were able to dig into as they worked all night in an attempt to find Roman. As daylight broke the next morning, heavy drilling equipment would be brought in to try and drill through the remaining 75 feet or 22.8 meters of rock left. They also started searching around the surrounding areas with canine units just in case Roman had washed out at any time. Finally though, 47 hours after the initial disaster, the firefighters were able to bust through the rock, and what happened next could only be described as a miracle. As the machines turned off from their constant humming, they would hear a faint screaming from the inside of the cave. Turns out, the loud sound of metal busting through rocks was loud enough to be heard over the raging river. Though unfortunately, the river was still too loud to have any meaningful communication with, though. Though luckily, the water had dropped enough that they were able to get a care package to Roman in order to keep what little energy he had left up. Just then, they were able to get two of the rescuers into the cave. They had to struggle though, as they pushed their way through the river, where they had to slowly grab Roman from the ledge. Luckily, Roman wasn't too eager to be rescued, as he would have been swept away by the raging river if he would have jumped out and reached too far. The rescuers were then able to throw him a rope where he then tied himself off to. As they were able to lead him further to the entrance, they had a stretcher waiting to carry him the rest of the way. All in all, Roman was cut up and badly dehydrated, but at the end of the day, he was alive. He was then transported to the nearest hospital, and the site was then cleaned up. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Roman's shoes? But then again, would anybody watching this actually have been in Roman's shoes? Remember to explore safely. And once again, thank you for watching. And remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons and turn on the notification bell for more content in the future. Goodbye for now.